Imagine the feeling of cold, dark water closing over your head and the shock stealing your breath. The terror of knowing something else is moving down there with you. That's where our story begins, with a girl named Maya, and a moment of pure, deliberate cruelty. If you've ever felt like the world turned its back on you, then you need to hear what happened next. Stay with me, because this story might just change the way you think about survival. And while you're here, if you love stories about the power of the human spirit, make sure to hit that subscribe button. What happens next you won't want to miss. The salt spray burned Maya's eyes, but she refused to cry. She focused on the horizon, a thin, steady line where the deep blue Pacific met the endless sky. It was a perfect day for the rich and reckless, the kind her classmates took for granted. The Seafoam Serenade, a 60-foot luxury yacht owned by Chad Wellington's father, glided across the water with arrogant grace. Music pounded through the speakers, the bass line echoing like a hollow heartbeat for an empty celebration. It was the end of the semester, and Chad, along with his loyal shadows Brad and Jason, had invited a carefully chosen few for a day of fun. Maya knew she wasn't invited for her company, she was there as the joke, the scholarship student, the outsider. Her marine biology course required field work, and Chad's father, an alumnus with too much money and too little conscience, had offered his yacht for the project. Maya, top of her class, had been chosen to manage the data collection. She wasn't a guest, she was the help. The boys in their blue and yellow varsity jackets never let her forget it. They were the kings of campus, born into confidence, raised on entitlement. Chad, their leader, had a smile that never touched his cold eyes. Brad was all muscle and sneer. Jason, the follower, laughed at everything his friends did, no matter how cruel. For hours they circled her like sharks, their words sharp enough to draw blood. "Forgot your lab coat, genius," Brad mocked, his breath heavy with cheap beer. "Don't get your equations on the seats," Jason added with a snicker. Chad said nothing. He just watched, sipping a drink, his silence louder than their insults. Maya focused on her work, checking salinity sensors and logging data, her hands trembling around her clipboard. She was a storm held inside a quiet body, her red blonde hair pulled tight, her sea-green eyes darting like a trapped animal's. Then it happened. She accidentally knocked over Chad's fishing rod. It clattered harmlessly to the deck, but it was all the excuse he needed. "Watch it," Chad barked, his comm mask cracking. "That's a $2,000 rod. You break it, you'll be paying it off till graduation." Maya whispered an apology, her voice small against the thump of the music. But Chad stepped closer, lowering his voice until it was just venom. "You think you are better than us, don't you? You're just a charity case pretending to belong." She froze, her chest tight. Before she could retreat, Brad moved in front of her. Jason blocked the other side. They cornered her near the dive platform at the back of the yacht. "I think our little scientist needs some hands-on experience," Chad sneered. Time for a marine biology lesson. Fear gripped her. This wasn't a prank, they were miles from shore. "Don't," she whispered. "Please." Her fear only excited them. Brad laughed. "Hear that? She's scared of a little water." "It's not the water," Chad said, grinning. "It's what's in it." And then she saw Ida, a dark fin slicing through the waves. A great white shark, circling. Her scientific mind registered details even through the panic. A juvenile, maybe 12 feet long, curious about the vibrations of the boat. But her human mind screamed. "See?" Chad whispered. "She knows what's out there. Consider these a broken bar extra credit." He gave the order with a nod. Brad's hand shoved her hard. The world spewed of the music, their laughter, the blinding sunlight, and then she hit the water. The cold struck like a hammer. The air vanished from her lungs. She surfaced, gasping, coughing salt. The yacht was already moving away. Their laughter faded. They had left her. Panic surged. She was treading water in the middle of Naueri, and she wasn't alone. The fin was back, cutting a slow path toward her. Every instinct screamed to swim, to fight, to run. But another voice inside her, a quiet one, Longbury Ida, rose up. "Panic means death." She forced herself to calm. She stopped thrashing. She floated still, eyes on the shark. She knew how they thought, curious, cautious, drawn to weakness. She refused to be weak. The shark came closer, brushed against her leg, a testing bump. The skin scraped her, blood blooming in the water. The animal turned again, its mouth parting just enough for her to see the rows of teeth. And then she did something no one expected. Not the shark, not the boys, not even herself. She fought back, with a desperate, furious cry. She swung and punched it directly in the eye. It wasn't strong, but it was enough. The shark recoiled, startled, and vanished into the deep. She stayed still, shaking, waiting. Seconds felt like hours. The ocean was silent again. She had survived, but survival was just the beginning. As the sun sank lower, the water grew colder. She thought of her mother, her tiny dorm room, her dreams. Rage replaced fear. They thought she'd die here, but she would not. Hours passed. She was fading when she saw Ida, a fishing trawler, slow and steady on the horizon. She waved weakly. At first, it seemed to pass her by. Then it turned. Rough hands pulled her aboard, wrapping her in blankets. Diesel fumes filled her lungs. She was alive. The captain, an old man named Hank, listened as she told her story in trembling fragments. His face hardened. "Wellington's yacht?" he muttered. "We saw them speeding for the harbor." He called the Coast Guard immediately. The official report called it an accident. With no proof and the Wellington family's influence, the case was buried. The boys expressed their relief that she was safe, and they walked free. But something in Maya had changed. The ocean hadn't taken her, it had remade her. The quiet, studious girl was gone. In her place stood something fierce, forged in saltwater and fury. She returned to campus and watched them from the shadows. No confrontation, no outburst, just silence and purpose. She studied harder, but not just marine life. She studied them, the Wellington Empire, their finances, their secrets, their lies. And she found everything: illegal dumping, bribery, fraud, environmental crimes buried beneath polished press releases. Then came the night of the Wellington Foundation Gala. Chad's father stood on stage, smiling for the cameras, about to accept an award for environmental stewardship. The screens behind him flickered. His speech cut off, and then Maya's video began. Footage from the yacht. His son's voice, the shove, the laughter, the fall. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Then the documents appeared: emails, payments, lies. The final screen read, "This is what stewardship looks like." The room exploded in chaos. Within days, the Wellington Empire collapsed. Arrests, investigations, expulsions. Chad, Brad, and Jason became national symbols of privilege turned poison. Their perfect futures destroyed. Maya never spoke publicly. She didn't need to. The world already knew. Weeks later, a plain envelope appeared at her door. Inside was a letter: "Greater than we've been watching. Your intellect, your will, and your sense of justice align with ours. The ocean has many monsters. Some have fins, others wear suits. We hunt them all." It was unsigned, sealed only with the mark of a trident wrapped in kelp. That night, Maya packed a bag and disappeared. Some said she joined a deep-sea research station. Others whispered she worked with secret conservation teams, hunting poachers and traffickers. No one knew for sure. But one thing was certain: the girl they threw to the sharks didn't die. She became something far more dangerous. She learned that the most powerful predator in the ocean isn't the one with teeth, it's the one with purpose. She was no longer prey, she was the storm. The days after the gala felt like the calm after a hurricane, and a kind of silence that's too still, too deliberate. The world was talking, headlines screaming about corruption, privilege, and the girl who had exposed it all. But Maya, she was nowhere to be found. On campus, whispers turned her into a legend. Some called her a hero, others, a ghost. Professors spoke of her brilliance in hushed tones, while students swapped theories about where she'd gone. Her dorm room sat empty, the blinds drawn, a few textbooks left open on the desk like she had just stepped out for class and never returned. But Maya hadn't disappeared. She had simply gone deeper, like a diver descending into darker waters, where the light fades but the truth lives. Weeks turned into months. The Wellington scandal sparked investigations across industries. CEOs resigned. Politicians distanced themselves from donors they once praised. The phrase "Seafoam Files" became a rallying cry online, used by activists and journalists alike. Somewhere, out at sea, Maya watched it unfold. She stood on the deck of a weather-beaten vessel painted in dull gray, its name erased. Around her, a crew moved with quiet efficiency, people who didn't ask questions and didn't talk about their pasts. They called themselves the Tidekeepers. The ocean that had once tried to take her now carried her forward. She learned navigation, deep-sea diving, even how to fight when words failed. Her body grew leaner, her eyes sharper, her heart harder, but she never lost her empathy. She simply learned to weaponize it. Their missions were unlike anything she'd imagined. Illegal whaling ships, deep-sea mining operations, human traffickers hiding behind fishing licenses, and the Tidekeepers hunted them all. And Maya, with her brilliant mind and unbreakable will, became one of their most precise instruments. Sometimes, when she stood at the ship's bow, the salt wind whipping through her hair, she thought of the boys, not with rage anymore, but with a kind of distant, cold satisfaction. They had created her, but they would never understand what they had unleashed. One night, the captain, the same man whose letter had brought her here, joined her on deck. He handed her a small metal badge embossed with the trident and kelp symbol. "You've earned it," he said simply. "You survived the storm. Now you are the storm." She didn't smile, she just nodded, tucking the badge into her jacket pocket. Somewhere beyond the waves, the faint lights of a cargo ship blinked. Another target, another hunt. And as the engines rumbled to life, Maya whispered the words that had once saved her in the cold dark water, greater than don't act like prey. The ship sliced through the waves, carrying her into another unknown horizon, not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as something far greater. A reckoning.